All right, so everyone, thank you to the Boston Office 365 user group. If you're not following us on the following mediums, please do. That's where we post upcoming events, videos once they're on YouTube, and just general Office 365 knowledge. So just a quick intro to the organizers. My name is Dimitri Arapetov. I'm with Turn Digital. With me, I have Mike Dixon, who's with Wellington Street Consulting, and Dave Pelleggi, who is with Staples. If you have any complaints or concerns about this user group, just direct them directly to Dave. So for those that were able to join us last time, we had an amazing session with Richard Harbridge talking about strategy and success, and he really laid out a great roadmap for different tools that are available to us as business analysts, as information architects, as strategists. We're working on getting this up to on YouTube, so that should be there fairly soon. So definitely check this out if you have some time. So Office 365 updates since last time. So a lot's happened since last time. We had the Ignite conference, as well as a ton of other updates that have been released. What you'll see in the coming slides are really just some of the highlights that we chose to share with you today. But I also want to mention that this is not a recap of Ignite. This does not cover things that have been announced that are months away. This is really focusing on things that are deploying between now and the end of the year. So the first thing up on the agenda is a new concept for Teams templates. And in doing so, there's 13 base ones that Microsoft's producing, but we can build your own. And here, they're really looking to build task-based templates. So if you have a different kind of template that you use for a project team versus a department team versus a rapid response team and so forth. And with this, you can predefine the structure with the channels, the tabs, the apps, and so forth. So pretty neat. Check it out, especially if you're creating a lot of teams and doing a lot of manual configuration afterwards. Moving forward, so endpoint security. Endpoint is the new name for Intune. There's some new reports that are available where you can now have a better look across the board to see what kind of virus incidents are coming up against your against Microsoft Defender in your organization, how many people are still pending updates, and so forth. So previously, you could drill into this data by going into each individual user. This gives us a little bit better visibility across the board. So definitely check that out if you have Intune deployed. Reminder, SharePoint 2010 workflows are being axed in about 2.5 weeks from now. So starting November 1st, Microsoft will remove the ability for you to run, create, or execute any kind of SharePoint 2010 workflows in the cloud, of course. They have released a tool that you could download in the link below that will scan your Office 365 environment and basically notify you if there are any SharePoint 2010 workflows that are still existing. And if so, you probably want to get on that pretty quickly. It's not clear to us at this point if them disabling the workflow engine will prevent you from opening the definition of a workflow, or if you might still be able to do that after the first. So we're advising all of our clients to make this a top priority before it's too late. Moving on to the next item. So I think everyone's heard about Microsoft lists. We've covered that in the last several sessions. So the same kind of list creation templates are coming to SharePoint. So you'll be able to, build it based on the initial few that include predefined conditional formatting and so forth. So definitely keep an eye out for that, especially if you like the new modern look that Microsoft Lists provides. So the long-awaited modern calendar view is finally coming. So this has been one of those requests that our clients have had ever since modern became a thing back a few years ago, and that was really to have a modern experience across the board, especially with calendars. So there's a new option coming now. Well, it's going to be actually released in the coming weeks to be able to go and create a calendar view that's modern. So we're very excited for this addition. There's also a new web part that's being released for org charts. A lot of people like what's available in Delve, they like what's available in the contact card, but they're still missing the ability to put that onto a page, or specifically if you're on a department, say on an intranet, essentially show who's rolling up within that department. So this will be rolling out pretty soon, and it should be done right about in the next week or so. Next one, so there's a new concept to hard mute, so you could prevent attendees from unmuting themselves in Teams. We've all had meetings where people have accidentally unmuted themselves, or potentially you're a teacher in a classroom and you're sick and tired of someone's cat or dog making noise in the background. You now have that ability to force it out, and that's starting to release into GA early October. And the next big announcement since we last met, so SharePoint syntax is now available beginning on October 1st. This is the first release coming out of Project Cortex, and we're very excited about what this offers. This basically takes machine learning and artificial intelligence and lets you train models to apply that to your data set and then populate the metadata that you store in SharePoint to have that. So classic example is to be able to have a document library for invoices. Every invoice is going to look a little bit different, but they're all going to have who it came from, what the amount is, when it's due, maybe some other metadata you like to extract. So this could give you a really great way to train a number of invoices, I think as little as 5, just to show what to look for, and then have it automatically apply to things that are coming through into that library. Pretty cool stuff. If you haven't had a chance to watch one of the demos, I would highly recommend it. Was there a question on this slide? So another thing I wanted to bring to everyone's attention here, if you have any kind of auto forwarding rules that you've set up in Outlook, maybe you're working with multiple companies and you like to forward that to your primary account, Microsoft has rolled out a new setting earlier this week or at the end of last week that actually automatically blocks that tenant-wide. And this is configured as part of an outgoing spam filter policy. So if you are using this, you might want to get ahead of this block or at least now respond to the block and ask for an exception to be added into that policy. So if you rely on any kind of automation or flows or things like that where emails are automatically being forwarded externally, that's basically going to break for you unless you're added to the exception policy. I've personally seen this happen to me with a few different accounts. So I heard it was coming, but then when it finally came, it forced me to take action.
So Dimitri, this will be enabled by default?
Yes.
Fun.
Yep. So the primary incentive is really to prevent a disgruntled employee from basically setting up a rule to forward everything to their Gmail and then have a massive data leakage aspect there. Another update for our friends of the user group that use Macs. I don't use a Mac, but I know some of us do. There's a new feature that was rolled out back in July where there's a try the new Outlook toggle. And recently Microsoft has added additional preview features into that try the new Outlook, which includes better experiences with mail, calendars, people, and search. We're hoping that someday the Outlook for Mac will be very similar to Outlook for PC. So this is giving us a little bit of encouragement in that direction. Another new web part that's pretty interesting is this new My Feed web part, and this would be a great addition to people's intranets because ultimately this gives you a very personalized view of what is coming up for a given individual. So this will pull things not just from documents and so forth that you have in SharePoint and OneDrive. This will actually extend across M365. So it'll go into your Outlook and say if you have a meeting coming up and what the attachments are all quickly at a glance. And this also combines it with other recommendations of things that you might be interested in, like the content discovery web part that we have today. So I'm really curious to see how this will behave once it's released, but I think this would be a very quick win for most intranets. Another new feature that's coming to Teams is the ability to specify the duration for your current status. So for example, if you walk away for 5 minutes to grab a coffee, maybe you don't want your computer to say that you're away. Or conversely, maybe you're busy and working on something and you want to make sure you block out the next hour, so you don't want your Outlook to show that you're available through Teams. So this new feature is starting to roll out at the end of this month and it should be completed by the middle of November. Another feature, so for those that had a chance to attend some of the Ignite sessions, you see Microsoft's putting a lot of investment into the search architecture. And there's a lot of great things coming down the pipeline. One of the more pressing upcoming changes is to be able to have personal query history added into search. So if you're constantly finding yourself searching for the same thing to get to the same spot, this will now give you personalized results. So I think it's pretty great. Basically, when you start typing ahead, the pull down will have some of your more recent ones. So definitely a welcome change. Another feature that we've personally desired for a long time, when Microsoft decided that required fields no longer have to be completed in order for you to save an item or upload a document, it was great because now you could do bulk uploads and bulk metadata assignments, but not so great if you have some required properties that you really want to make sure people can't, publish pages without assigning the right metadata tags or making sure that they have all of the required fields completed. So starting pretty soon, there will now be an ability for people to be forced to complete those required properties prior to being able to publish their page. So if you're using custom tagging or targeting, this is going to be a lifesaver.
And
Next
this
up,
is a feature that only applies to site pages?
so this currently would apply to site pages and news pages.
Okay.
Another pretty nice announcement from Microsoft, that you can now try out Microsoft conferencing for free until free for a year. So this is the spot where if you set up a Teams meeting, you sometimes might want to include a phone number for people to dial into, especially if somebody's on a spotty connection because they're traveling, or maybe they're taking it from their car and they really don't want that visual distraction. So if any of your clients are interested, you can now go and basically get a free dial-in bridge for a year. Normally this costs $4 per user per month, so I think this is a pretty generous giveaway from Microsoft. Another neat feature that I've already seen on my phone, sometimes I join the same meeting from my computer as well as my phone. Sometimes if I have to go and refill my cup of coffee in the middle of a meeting and I don't want to lose the conversation, I'll join the meeting from my phone, connect it to the same Bluetooth, get my coffee, come back, and nobody knows the difference. But with that being said, sometimes it's a little confusing, especially if you have your speakers turned on or if you have other things that you might forget that you're still joined on a secondary device. So with this new option, when you try to join a meeting from a second device, it'll ask you if you want to join it without audio on that device, or if you want to transfer it to that device, in which case it'll make sure that there's no echo from multiple microphones or multiple speakers being turned on at the same time. So certainly a welcome change for that. All right, so done with the updates. We definitely want to thank our sponsors, especially our platinum sponsor, which is the company that I work for, that helps keeps the lights on and pay the bills for running the user group. That being said, we're brought to our main event. Presentation here by Akil Hader talking about automate, govern, deploy, and manage Microsoft Teams in an enterprise environment. So without further ado, I'm going to pass the mic over to Akil.
Thank you, Dimitri. Appreciate that. I'm going to share my deck here very quickly. Okay. Let me know when you guys can see it.
We can see it in PowerPoint edit mode.
We can see it PowerPoint edit mode, yeah.
Thanks, Dave.
Did it refresh to full presentation mode?
Yes, it did.
Perfect. Okay. Thanks, guys, for making the time and inviting me. I appreciate it. Some of this is a little aged information. I just like that nerdy picture of mine. I look a lot older now. The black hair has been replaced with a lot of gray and balding spots, thanks to SharePoint. I am based out of Seattle. I work for a company called Green IT Consulting. We are a small boutique shop located here and with customers across the country nationally. Been with SharePoint and the .NET experience for the past close to 18, 19 years now. Can't believe that SharePoint 2001 will be it's been 20 years since the platform actually originally came out. Today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover as organizations, as the title said, as organizations move to the cloud, and their content from their traditional SharePoint 2013, 2010, even 2016 farms gets distributed amongst different workloads. It leads to a governance issue. And I'm going to cover very quickly some basics of governance. I know this audience pretty much probably knows what it is. I'm then going to go into coming up with a balanced model around governance. And for today's discussion, we're going to focus on MS Teams, but there are multiple workloads to govern in Office 365. And then at the base of my discussion is the security capabilities in O365, to which end I don't think we're going to get to. I am also going to try to cover I'm going to share some code with you guys on a recent project where we automated the Teams creation process through a workflow in Power Automate and hooking it up with a Azure function. And I'll share the code of the Azure script with you today to give you an idea. And I'll share it through Dimitri with the group as well, so that you have something to start with if you're going to deploy this within your organization. Unfortunately, due to the NDA situation with my customer, I can't show you the live site on which it is deployed because they did go live with it and into production. So we'll stop over there, but I can show you the actual code that I own as part of the IP that I developed for them. Feel free. I'm on my laptop. I don't have multiple screens in front of me right now, so feel free to ask questions. If somebody asks a question in chat, I'll ask one of Dimitri or one of you other guys to just read it out to me. Or if you want to go off of mute and ask me a question, please do so as we're going through. And I know some of this will not be directly impacting Teams, but it is important to cover because of the underlying content stores behind Teams on where content is actually being stored. So it's important to cover some of these aspects from that perspective. Any questions so far on what we're going to be covering as part of the agenda today? Normally, this is a 2-hour call. I'm not going to keep you guys. I'm going to try to finish and wrap it up within 45 minutes to an hour. And if you guys want follow-ups or more detailed discussions, I had shared my contact information up above as part of the discussion here. All right. So at a very high level, this is, of course, the textbook definition. What is governance? Governance is a set of policies, roles, responsibilities, and processes that controls how an organization's business divisions and IT teams work together to achieve its goals. Why do you want to have governance within your Office 365 tenant? Well, obviously to maximize your ROI, you want to make sure that your content is secured in the cloud and compliant with various nefarious government organizations, and also to be able to streamline your deployment so that your use cases are mapped to technology solutions. As we were going through the slide deck that Dimitri was sharing, you guys would notice that in Office 365, Microsoft has 10 ways of doing 10 things, 10 in 10 different tools. So you end up with a n-square algorithm from a big O perspective of how you can actually do execute certain tasks or do certain things. What makes sense, when, where, and how, we're going to talk a little bit about that. Very quickly, it's very important that every organization set up a governance team within their organization. And this is before you actually even roll out Teams or any of the Office 365 things. It's a high-touch system. And that's what that means is that You can leverage Teams for chatting. You can leverage Teams for video conferencing. You can leverage Teams for what we're doing right now, a webinar session. You can. It's got a back end of SharePoint to share and collaborate on. It's got so many different use cases and workloads. It's extremely high touch. So it's very important to have a governance team that covers the whole aspect of all those touch points within an organization. I'm not going to spend too much time on what type of roles you need within an organization. For example, if you are a Staples, like a pretty large organization, you might need to have all these different roles fulfilled in order to govern your team's deployment properly, or your Office 365 deployment properly. If you are a smaller shop like us, a boutique shop, well, one person or two people might wear multiple hats, but they should clearly understand the role that they're playing within the concept of that governance team that I shared. The other key thing I want to talk about is that Office 365, as everyone is aware, is a very powerful tool. Whenever companies come to me and go, we want to upgrade from our SharePoint on-prem and we want to go to SharePoint online, can you help us with that? Or they will come back and say, hey, we want to roll out MS Teams to replace our conferencing tool, whatever legacy-based on-prem tool it is. Now that audio PTSN capabilities are fully integrated in Teams, you can actually have a phone number and have a fully cloud-enabled conference calling system, as well as individually assigned phone numbers to people with full transcription and voicemail features and things like that. It has a significant impact on how content is actually stored through its life cycle. So it's important to actually have a change management policy defined, and it's also necessary that your governance policy defines how change itself will be managed through the organization. A lot of times people don't do this, and if you don't, this is where, oh, Teams sucks, or OneDrive went south, or oh my God, I can't use SharePoint in the cloud, it really sucks. So having a managed change management policy that is tied into your governance policy can lead to a wholly positive experience. And if you don't do that, you're going to end up with a negative experience. I'm not going to spend too much time over here, but it's very important to clearly identify what will you provide with each service. So if you are deploying Teams for XYZ reasons, it's important to identify what component of Teams is going to provide what service. You also have to be, one of the key things that happens is as you roll out Teams within your organization, the key distinction between what used to be on-premise versus cloud-based implementations is that your service level agreements are going to be bound by what Microsoft can give or not give you. At the beginning of our discussion, if you notice that there was a slight jib at my Office 365 going down. Well, if it does go down, you can't do anything about it. So you need to come up with some sort of a policy and procedure in place to understand what your SLA is going to be and what your fallback option is going to be. And the key thing to understand in Teams is also how do you prevent the proliferation of unmanaged content or services being misused, especially around the ability now, which everyone I'm sure is aware of. I use this example all the time. In Teams, we have the ability to invite outside organizational guests, which is turned on by default. You have the Teams Management Center. You can go in there and configure the policies and retention policies and label policies, and then apply them to the content that you are hosting in Teams. But if you don't think of all these things, you're going to end up in a scenario where you will end up with unmanaged content, ungoverned content, and potentially leakage of said content if external people are allowed to be invited into the team and view said content. So there are things you can do to authenticate. You can enable multi-factor authentication. You can run reports, as Dimitri was earlier showing, which can give you a very good idea using EMS Intune, or now called Endpoint. You can see who logged in, when, where, how, and what actions they performed on said content, not just in Teams, but across the board. Now, this is important, and I want to spend a little bit of time on this slide and just talk a little bit about balancing your governance when you are rolling out teams. One of the key things that has actually changed is what you see on the bottom, but I'll start with the top first. It used to be very centric, that you used to have portals, divisional portals. You'd have group and team sites. You'd have project and workspaces and my sites. And from an IT pro and IT administrator's perspective, that when this was a hosted solution on premise, before it moved to the cloud, it was very simple to tightly govern from a top-down perspective. And what used to happen with that is either you would, what I call the mushrooming effect. People would have parallel project sites, parallel team sites, and nobody would utilize the portal and divisional portals because they were so tightly locked down. With the end result that you would end up with a situation where a lot of customers, when we would go into their environment to help them migrate to the cloud, they would find out that they would have sites that they haven't touched in 3 years, but there are orphan records in those sites, and sometimes they would find content in there that would have PII data in there, or even for healthcare providers like HIPAA compliant data and so forth. So it's important to understand that when you actually now leverage the governance tools in O365 to govern your MS Teams or other workloads in Office 365, you actually have reporting and tools capability in the governance admin center to configure and apply those regular expressions to said content, so that you can actually take quarantining action or other action as and when you need to secure your content. The key difference on securing content from a balancing perspective is that it is now more based upon use cases. So as Dimitri was saying, you're going to have 13 types of templates that you can build. You can then apply governance rules to each template type, for example, and therefore govern the content. If that template is used, then let's say if it's marked as private, you can only move content in there that is privately hosted. Everything is run through Office 365 groups, as many people would be aware on this call. One of the basic things that any organization needs to do is understand who within the organization can create teams, can modify teams, can retire teams, and define an entire life cycle around it. It's very important to define that process and to define that structure. If you don't do that, then it will end up in that willy-nilly thing. And also, it will, even if you do use templates, it will lead to multiple sources of truth instead of a single source of truth. For example, that every single project should only have a single team associated with it. There might be some use cases where somebody will raise a hand and say, no, I need an extra one because it's a sub team and so forth. Well, you have channels for that. You can secure content in channels that you don't want your customers to see or guests to see. You can actually secure content by retention labels. So if accidentally somebody uploads a credit card let's say somebody uploads a document with a credit card information or designs a Power App that is hosted on an MS Teams or integrated with an MS Teams window, and somebody puts a unencrypted credit card form field in there and types it in. And instead of storing it in a SharePoint list, I'm making this up, or in CDS or wherever, the system immediately can flag it and move it into the right secure location and send notifications to the admin. These are the kind of things that you actually have to think about when you actually roll out teams within an organization, because there is an underlying, the key difference from the old days of SharePoint and now is that there are disparate content stores underlaying the technology. And so you have to be aware as IT pros and administrators and people providing this service to your end users that content is now distributed, and you need to know where it is going, and you need to configure policies accordingly. I'll pause here and take questions if any have popped up. If not, I'll continue. Okay. Going once, going twice, gone.
So far, so good.
Okay, great, thank you. So I have just briefly put this up. This is old. It's there are many more. As you can see, Flow is now Power Automate, and there's Power BI and all that other stuff. I have not updated this slide. It's just there to provide an overall idea that all these technologies can be embedded in teams. And you are going to have a situation where you might have end users, and I haven't even talked about connectors to third-party systems to consume and post data and pull data from as of yet. Just the sheer power of the tool in the capability that it brings all these things together. In my old incorrect way of saying it, essentially Teams is a wrapper around all the different services in Office 365. And when you actually have such a powerful tool, you need to know its capability. You need to know that you have, well, not just you need to know, you need to do something about governing where each and every aspect of that high touch system is storing content, managing content, and retiring content through its life cycle. And to that effect, as I've said, you need to know your boundaries and limitations of said content. You are all aware that it's a group. A team is based on a group. A group's membership is therefore based on it has a SharePoint underlying SharePoint site behind it, and then there are management controls that I've just talked about over there. You have a team email, you have which used to be the old distribution list. Now, if you're replacing that, what happens and where does that that content go? Understand that when you actually invite guests into your team, you are effectively giving, and you guys all know this, the people can click on the link saying open in SharePoint. Now that person, if they're given the wrong level of permissions, can potentially go in there and look at other content that you might have thought that you've hidden from them on that site that you might be using for internal conversations, for example. Planner is there. There are, as I said, I couldn't draw everything in this deck regarding all the different types of things. And why do I put Skype in here? I recently realized that there is an integration between not Skype for Business, but the old Skype, the one that was on Hotmail. Anyone remember that Skype, the one, the public-facing Skype, the one that is for the free tool? Apparently, there is an integration between that, and it is extremely popular in other countries. So people use Skype in India, in China, and other places a lot because that's a tool that they used to use. Obviously, Microsoft wants to retire it and move it out, but for corporate users, that's very much easy. But when you have companies that are used to using a tool for free versus when they actually have to pay a license for end users, it's a whole different ball game and a discussion. So instead of actually solving that problem, what Microsoft did is that, you can integrate Skype with Teams. And I'm sitting there scratching my head as to what use case would that be. And this was what was highlighted to me as one of the reasons for it. Of course, there's Power BI, there's Office Online, there's Planner, there's SharePoint, all the workloads that we just talked about. So it's important that you understand that all these different you might think that you've defined a retention policy on content that is stored in SharePoint and everything is secure. The small response to that I have is no, it's not, because people could be talking about what they're not supposed to talk about in chat windows, and that content is not actually saved inside SharePoint. It's saved inside Teams, and that you have to know where that content, for example, is stored so that you can apply the appropriate governance controls around it. And so one of the key things that every time we will go into a customer, and now moving towards the automation piece, is that we are asked by many of our customers that, hey, I want to tightly control who can provision teams within my organization. And that's all great and dandy. And what people can do within the team structure, so forth. Great, we can control that as well. But if you lock it down too much, guess what happens? People don't actually use it. So one of the key things that I was asked was that, hey, I want to control who can create teams and then apply templates to it and then do what I want them to only do in Teams. And I said, can you help automate that for us? I said, absolutely. What at a conceptual level, we basically build a Canvas app in Power App for them, tied it to a SharePoint backend list with a Power Automate flow, which calls an Azure script to actually execute and create the said team. We're going to see that in a little bit, but let me just address two things on that. One was that that they very tightly controlled the Office 365 group membership of who was in that group, who would have the rights to provision a team. And so that was step one. The second step was that they said, let's once this is approved, we want the team to be provisioned automatically. I said, all right, no problem. And back then, these templates were not released. Understand that this was done about 6 months, 7 months ago. They said that we want to then apply all these labels. And I said, I can always do that post the provisioning of the team and adding the users and all of that stuff. So we did all of that for them, and lo and behold, they said, well, once it's approved, you just run this and it should provision everything and it's all hunky-dory. I said, great. I said, on the automate side, who's going to have permissions to control the provisioning process? And the response I got was, well, we're going to create a Azure security group, Azure Active Directory security group, and we are going to populate it with the members who are going to be allowed to approve said content. I said, perfect, great. So they went ahead and created the Azure group for the first 3-4 months. And there were only 3 or 4 people in that group who would receive a notification from Power Automate whenever there was a new entry into this list that I just described for you. And the request would come in. It would either get accepted or rejected. In case it was rejected, the workflow would notify the end user that your request has been rejected for XYZ reason, talk to a XYZ person. But if it was approved, the system would basically grab that, and I'll show you the script in a second, would grab that, pass on the necessary parameters, and go ahead and provision the team and the associated SharePoint site, or if it was just a SharePoint site minus a team, and I'll walk you guys through that logic in a second. But guess what they did? Once we had left and this was deployed, somebody who was looking at this on the Azure side didn't know what this group was being used for, because they didn't have any naming conventions, and I don't want to get into this. Is not a full-blown governance discussion. They decided to add all authenticated users into that group. And I was like, oh, we just want everybody to be able to approve the, I don't know what their thought process was, but they were thinking they wanted everybody to be able, within departments, to be able to approve the team creation process. So some genius on the AD side, and this is at a very prominent hospitals chain on the West Coast, so I won't take their name, and that's one of the reasons I can't actually show you that site. But this actually happened with the end result that the entire project, all the stuff that we had done, was completely tanked, because now everybody could approve their own. Like, you would get a notification, like suddenly 1,000 emails were being generated in Exchange, and people were receiving notifications up the wazoo to approve a team's creation. And of course, within 2 hours of this event taking place, I got a 911 call from the customer saying, hey, what the hell happened? Can you help us? And everybody was looking at the admin center in Office 365 to try to figure this out. Nobody actually went to the Azure Active Directory to see what had happened. And so when we got re-engaged, we solved it for them, but that's essentially what happened. That was one bad part about it. The second bad part about it was that during that period of time, everybody could potentially create a team. All they had to do was approve the request and so forth. And willy-nilly, more than 300 or so teams got created in that one morning when all this spam email was being generated by their email filter. So these are the kind of things that you have to think about, secure. I'm giving tactical examples of what lessons learned are when you've actually deployed this on the ground. So let's actually, this is a good segue into moving into our next discussion on looking at actually some of the code and the script that we actually wrote for this customer. Let me actually get out of this deck here. Go in here, there, stop that. Now, where is it? There it is. Okay. Just cross-checking. Are you guys able to see my my script? Are you guys able to see the code?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I switched. So think about this script for a second being called from a. It is being called from a Power Automate workflow as I created that scenario. There are multiple parameters that the script is expecting and is dealing with when it is receiving receiving the call. I will if asked, I will share the script, but it's my IP. Of course that the first thing it's expecting is if this is, and I'll explain this. There are three parameters related to the fact that this might be a shared. This is the same engine that is being used to create a SharePoint site or a team. So that's why you see multiple variables. So you have a SharePoint site title, site alias, site template. If the the owner, the item ID, of course, I need that from to repopulate the list item back when I post back to that list. after I have created the site and the team. Enable team, that is if this is not just a SharePoint site but a team as well. External guests, are those going to be allowed or not? It's a yes no field. Site type, this is based upon the template type. So think of this as creating a SharePoint site, applying a template to it, and then associating that site with the team that you've created. This is exactly what this script was doing. Also, if you are designating that site to be a hub site and tying it to the team, you could do that. Who the primary team owner is, the secondary team owner, internal team members, blah, blah, blah. NU department, that is the metadata to associate that team with a particular retention policy, and then the owning organization as well. And of course, the team's URL, which was populated if the team had already been created, but they wanted to create a SharePoint site to be associated with that team or a template to be applied. That was a third use case for which this script is being used. This is, as people who've done stuff in Azure, all I'm doing over here is getting the admin site URL. I am getting the storage connection string and then the service account creds that I have stored in my resource repository in Azure. And then I am also blanking out the enable team URL. And I'll explain why I'm doing that in a second. The first thing I'm doing, of course, in here is going to the config file to basically get the Azure storage file content, get the context of that, and then also creating the site using the PNP online call to it and providing the service account credentials. After the new PNP site is created, I fall out and I sleep for 60 seconds. And then I generate the template for which they have, for what they're asking me to do over here, based upon the incoming templates that have been stored already on the system. I then apply that template to the particular site that I have created, right over here. Getting the new site and then and then of course applying some of these site templates. One of the things that I'm doing, as you can see over here, is that I am turning on and turning off certain features. It was specific business requirements why these were done. The next thing I am now doing is that I am creating a team with the enable team URL, which is blank. I'm creating it. I am then adding that, and then I am outputting the team's URL into the enable team parameter. And of course, I'm doing that right there. There is then I am connecting back to the original list, and I am updating all the parameters of all the items that I have overall created and so forth. And then, of course, I am outputting all of this information. I'll pause here. Any questions on this stuff that I'm doing? It's pretty straightforward from a coding perspective. I guess not. Okay.
Nothing currently in chat.
Pardon me?
Nothing currently in chat.
Perfect. Okay. So that covers the provisioning piece of this. I'm going to switch back to my deck. 1 second. I wish I could actually show you this happening, but as I said, I'm under NDA in production. I can't really show it. So we will go into the last piece of this presentation. It should take about 10-15 more minutes, and then we'll wrap it up. I won't keep you guys that long. There it is. So that covers the automation piece, the provisioning of the teams, and covering it. I did not cover specific, in this particular case, I did not cover applying a template. Understand that feature has just been rolled out, and or setting any values after the team is provisioned. There is an entirely separate script that I ran to do that, and that is post-provisioning of the team and applying the security group and the associating the SharePoint site associated with it. And if I have time, I'll try to show you that as well towards the end. Let me just quickly cover the security capabilities of Office 365 that you need to be aware of when you are securing your and governing content in Teams. I'm just going to poll the audience and quickly just ask somebody who's actually seeing the chat these are the 7 major security areas or capability tools available to us to secure content in Office 365 and Teams. Anyone here not aware of these 7 items? I'm assuming no. Everybody has seen this before, correct? Or if it's no, it's okay. I just want to know at what level do I need to cover this. Well, anyways, I'm used to having polls with it, and this is where I used to love doing these sessions face to face, because I could poll my audience and see what was actually the responsiveness of the group.
We could certainly write.
Pardon me?
We could actually create a poll if you like. I can actually do that if you want.
It's okay, and I should have done. I apologize. Should have done it ahead of time. But so one of the, as I said, DLP allows us to leverage pre-built or custom policies to protect sensitive data. I've just given some examples of these pre-built policies. You can go into the governance center and configure these and apply them to your team's template. And then when you provision a team with that template, this personally identifiable information, for example, will protect erroneous upload or sharing of content within that team at any given moment in time. It's actually, I've tested this. It's actually so effective that if I'm typing dummy credit card information in my chat window and trying to share it with someone within my organization, for example, the other day I was buying everybody lunch. They say the system immediately tagged it as such, and the other person didn't receive the message, and I got an admin notification that somebody tried to do this. So it's pretty powerful. It's real time, as real time as it can get in the cloud. Obviously, if you are sitting in India and you are typing and your tenant is hosted in Brazil, there will be a little bit of lag if you've set up a new policy, but it is there. The ability for you to take custom actions and the ability to put conditional actions and block content and send notifications is all there. And you can actually tie it to all the messages and so forth in chat, in your activity log, as well as all the data storage capabilities and connectors that you, I haven't even covered connectors yet, but there's a whole slew of things that you have to do when you're using third-party connectors to bring content in from other locations. Of course, everybody should be aware of rights management and RMS or IRM as it's called. You have the ability to control and set these at the library level in the old days. Now you actually have this at the teams level as well. And you can actually configure the rights management policy in the governance center to do this. The retention policy is very important. Again, this can be tied into a Teams template, and then you can actually, one of the cool things is it's the preservation and the deletion policy. Sure, deletion used to be awesome. I could delete a lot of law firms for which we have deployed teams love this because they don't want any record of anything after a certain date. And so everything gets flushed out after a certain point. Preservation as well. So based on certain metadata definitions and tags, it's very important that timeframes to how long you're going to save content, where you're going to save it, and so forth can be built. It's important to think about retention policies when you're creating teams because you want to make sure that the content doesn't sit around for longer than it has to, and or it is actually part of a preservation policy so it doesn't get deleted, although somebody might even go ahead and delete the whole team. But if somebody does that, the content can be preserved and moved to a secure location, and there are ways and processes that can be built to handle that. I won't go too much into device management, and as you heard Dimitri at the beginning talk a little bit about the Intune is now called Endpoint. That was announced recently. As I said, this deck is a little aged. It's about 3-4 months old. You can manage, you can control who does what and who can access what from where, and you can configure your device management capabilities in Office 365. Auditing is actually very is pretty powerful. Almost every action that a user can do in Office 365 over the last 90 days can be audited. And this is even true if you have SharePoint on-prem hooked in with a hybrid environment with SharePoint Online. You can then export the results, and you can then import them into an Excel spreadsheet or a Power BI dashboard and do whatever you want with it. I'll give you a specific example. We were using MS Teams with a customer of ours recently to collaborate on a project, and the customer was concerned that some of my guys, they were uploading content, and that some of my guys they weren't updating the content, they were just reading it. And there was a question raised as to the overall number of hours spent on reading certain amount of content. Well, I was able to create a report at the user level to actually provide to the customer that, hey, this person spent these many hours reading your XYZ requirements and functional document that was stored in Teams, essentially SharePoint underneath it. But I was able to do that, and it's important to configure this, especially when you have teams that are going to be used for external use, especially external content. E-discovery is the last one, which I'll cover. We have many use cases where teams might be being used by law firms and other legal entities where people need to place holds. In the old days, if you remember, the only thing that you had e-discovery available on was email and Exchange and maybe some file shares and SharePoint, of course, on-prem. Well, now you can actually have an e-discovery ability to actually assign permissions to a case. You can create legal holds for sites and mailboxes. You can actually have legal holds for an entire team. So all the content in it can be marked and stored for a certain period of time. Merci. I have rushed through a 3-hour training session in 50 minutes, I think, or 45 to 50 minutes. I know it's late at your end. I don't want to keep you guys too long, but I hope this has been productive.
It has. There's actually a question in the chat.
Okay.
So Phil is asking how to help external users to chat in MS Teams from an old meeting. In brackets, he has Teams admin, jump to external access, jump to add domains. How to apply a policy for specific external domains.
Okay, so there are two pieces to this. The one, I'm being told that you want to control chat that is there for an older team, a meeting that has already happened and expired. Is that the question, or are you applying? You're saying applying a policy to that particular chat? That's my. I'm not sure. Let me actually read the question. How to
right. It is in two sections.
Okay. All right. So there are two separate questions. Got it. Okay. So the first, how to help external users to chat in MS Teams from an old meeting. Well, you can open the old meeting in Teams. You can click on it from your browser and just hit the chat window for that team, and it'll pop it inside your chat browser inside Teams in the chat, and you can then talk to people within that context. I don't know why you would want to do that. Again, if the meeting has expired and you want to chat about it, that's a different point. But to chat, like, I wouldn't want to go back and type something in this meeting chat a week from now. That wouldn't make any sense from a use case perspective. To answer your second question on how to apply what policy for specific external domains, you cannot apply it for specific external domains yet. You can apply it for external users. So, for example, you can restrict based upon the IP address or domain of users that can be added to your teams, for example, and you can do that from the governance center. But you do not want a team, just the ability to chat. Okay, yes. So in that's a great example, Deb. Post meetings and continuous group chats happen all the time. Absolutely, the group of people do not want a team, just the ability to meet and chat, and that's absolutely great. So you can, in that instance, you should create a chat session with them, and add all the users you want and talk to them there, and then that chat can be fully governed by your policies that I talked about. If it's in the context of the previous meeting, yes, of course, you can also do that, as I said on how to do that earlier. But if you want to have a specific conversation with a specific set of groups about what had happened in that meeting, you can continue the chat in that. The chat will get into your recent chat activities, and you can continue having that chat with those people outside of the context of Teams. One challenge is when that group becomes a team, but once a member continues to use the old chat. Yeah, I can't help with that part. That's a process issue and a people issue, not necessarily a tool issue. If you want an easy way of exporting that chat and moving it into the new team, I can tell you how to do that. But I can't solve the problem if the person continues to use the old chat versus the new chat. Anyways, I think that answers that, and that can be done using PowerShell, by the way. The other cool thing is on the PNP site for Teams now, additionally, we have about 8 new flags that have been introduced in the API to set certain properties of the team. I highly recommend that if you're going to automate the team creation process and you need to set certain values and parameters, you look at the PNP online PowerShell variables and values that can be passed onto the add-team the parameter that I showed you guys in the script. Okay, I think that answers that. Oh, somebody's joining the meeting now. I think
They've bounced in and out a couple of times.
Oh, okay.
Sometimes people end up falling off due to situations.
Okay.
All right. Well, Akil, thank you so much. I think I certainly learned a thing or two.
Thanks
for putting this together.
I know you know more than I do, so
I wouldn't be sure about that. So thank you again. Everyone, please do stick around. We have a few more updates to share with you, and then we have a raffle at the end where Akil is brainstorming 2 great raffle questions to ask when we get to that slide in just a few. And Akil, that was a little shoulder nudge to think of 2 raffle questions for us. So we do want to share some upcoming events. Many of you have attended SharePoint Saturdays in previous years. Most of them have been rebranded to O365 Saturdays and then over time M365 Saturdays. So most of these have been moved virtually to keep the community spirit going. And in fact, we have 4 that are coming up between today and our next user group session. So if you're looking to learn more, these events are free. Definitely check out spsevents.org and make sure to register. Akil, are you speaking at any of these events?
I am speaking at the one in Houston, and it's actually a much bigger presentation on governance. That's the one I'm speaking at, not at any of the other ones. I spoke at Chicago in March, but I am only speaking at the Houston one this time in October.
Will that be a 6-hour presentation in an hour and 30 minutes?
Exactly.
Dimitri, is there any word on the SharePoint Office 365 group? I'm sorry, the New England SharePoint Saturday.
I have not heard anything.
Okay.
But that's not to say there isn't one.
Okay, just curious.
Yeah. And by the way, to Dave's point here about watching things faster than real time, with a lot of the Ignite sessions, I was trying to cram in 45-minute sessions in a matter of 25 minutes. So for some of them, I have been watching them at 1.5 or 2x the speed. It actually works well if you're fully concentrated on it.
I think I can deliver sessions better when I'm going faster. It depends upon the audience. When I'm talking to the user group, I'm assuming everybody is an IT pro or a developer or a business person who's used this tool before, instead of spending 25 minutes introducing the tool.
Yeah, no, I'm fully with you. Okay, so just moving forward, does anyone have any other community events that are coming up that you'd like to share? If so, please put it into the chat window, and we'll read it out loud after. Okay, we want to give a quick shout out to some of our neighboring user groups. We have the Rhode Island SharePoint user group hosted by DRC. We have the Hartford O365 user group hosted by Jared, and Jared's actually going to be our speaker next month. We have the Granite State user group hosted by Julie and Jim. And there's a few other related user groups in the area. If you're interested in any of these technologies, please do check them out. So coming up next time, we have a great presentation from Jared. He's going to talk to us about Microsoft Teams and Beyond the Hype Machine. So I think today we had a very strong focus from Akil on governing and really rolling it out for the enterprise. I think with Jared's presentation next month, it's going to be a lot more as like an end user, like very pragmatic ways that you can use Teams to make your life easier and more effective. So we're looking forward to that. So that being said, we want to come to the next slide here. So I'll pause for a sec. Feel free to unmute yourselves. Is anyone running into any strange issues or problems that you'd like to ask the group? Or conversely, do you have any tips or something that you've discovered that you think others might benefit from?